Session im Destination Day 3 begrüßen. Wir wollen uns in den nächsten 25 Minuten beschäftigen mit der Sharing Economy bzw. mit den Politikempfehlungen zur Gestaltung der Sharing Economy. Und ich bin sehr froh, dass wir einen hochrangigen Referenten hier haben mit Alain Dupeyras aus Paris. Er ist Head of Tourism der OECD. Und er wird uns ganz aktuelle Überlegungen zu diesem Thema vorstellen. Alain, the stage is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm representing the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, based in Paris. We have about 34 member countries. And yesterday we just launched our new publication, OECD Tourism Trends and Policies 2016. And if you go to the website, you will have a lot of information on this. This is analyzing, promoting good policy practices in tourism in about 50 countries. And so this is providing detailed data and analysis on these countries. In this publication, we have in particular 3 chapters, one general on tourism policies and trends, another one on transport and connectivity issues, looking in particular at the way by better cooperating transport and tourism can enhance the visitor experience. And the third chapter, which is the one I will introduce to you today, is about sharing economy in tourism. So all of this information, as I said, is available also on the website for part of it. First question is maybe what we have to pose ourselves is what is the sharing economy? And in doing this analysis, we have been, there is evidence that there is no single definition of a sharing economy. And in fact, what we are speaking about is about new marketplaces that allow services to be provided on a peer-to-peer or shared usage basis. Since we did this report, in fact, more and more people are saying we should not use sharing economy, so there are many other words that we should use, so we should not focus too much on this particular wording. What is clear and what is common, certainly in tourism, is the fact that the role of digital platforms that is growing, and the role of digital platform is growing in tourism, and this is what, in fact, makes the sharing economy. In a snapshot, clearly as the sharing economy is growing very fast, and this growth is expected to continue even exponentially over the years to come. Much of this growth, in fact, happens in tourism, and this is related to the nature of the tourism services, which makes it a primary market for sharing economic activities. Shared accommodation arrangements are the most well established, where people rent part or all their residence to short-stay visitors. And here you can think about pioneering in the sector, like couchsurfing, but of course all of us know Airbnb and some others. So there are a number of platforms which dominate this market. Just a figure, Airbnb now offered over 1 million properties in more than 200 countries in the world. Transport is another well-established area where individuals provide transportation in a personal vehicle. Uber, of course, there has been a lot of discussion on Uber, but there are also different models like BlaBlaCar in France, which is covering more than 70 countries, and this is also a growing side of a sharing economy in tourism. But we also have some new part of the tourism economy which are entering this market, like the dining and travel experience. So the question we analyze is, what are the implications of this sharing economy for the tourism economy? New technologies, new business models, they are creating new marketplaces and giving people new options for where to stay, what to do, and how to get around. This is very clear with the sharing economy in tourism. And more, this is of course being driven by technological advances. Think about smartphone, but also people are increasingly open to sharing resources. As I said, the business model vary a lot from one platform to another, and different platforms have significantly different approaches. Some very closely mimic the traditional commercial sector, while some others are closer to what we may call user sense of community. You know? Think about Uber X, for example, or BlaBlaCar in the transport sector. We also see that as the sharing economy in tourism mature, that the business model available to consumers are also evolving, and now platforms are developing specific services, for example, for business travelers. So we have been looking at the opportunities to grow the tourism economy on one hand, and the challenges on the other hand of this new part of the economy. First thing is that the sharing economy presents opportunities in terms of expanding consumer options and growing the market for tourism services. They are able to provide a more diverse offering to different types of tourism demand. It could be budget-friendly, or it could be people looking for more authentic experiences, you know, with Airbnb and being accommodated with a local resident, or it could be covered by covering neglected market segments. Second, it's unable to make use of existing underutilized assets, and so to generate value-added and enable product development. So it provides alternative services, options, and services in areas that lack adequate infrastructure. We will see this a bit later. So it adds capacity also in a number of places. And we have a number of cities where hotel capacity was just, you know, limited, and shared accommodation offered additional capacity. It stimulates innovation and entrepreneurship, and so it forced traditional operators to rethink, to some extent, their service offering to enhance the visitor experience. And we see now a number of partnerships between traditional industry operators, like between Hilton and Uber, for example, but there are a number of others which are developing this. It helped to spread tourism to less visited areas, especially lacking tourism infrastructure, as I was saying. Think, for example, about rural areas where there is potentially a number of private accommodation available, and this has helped, you know, this accommodation to be put on the global market. But also in big cities, outside of the main hotel zone, this has also supported this. And platforms are often communicating on this, in particular Airbnb. It extends benefits of tourism to more people. So it helped, I mean, a number of people who were not at all in the tourism business before are now able, through this platform, to develop some new services for a tourism economy, and so to be part of a tourism economy. But of course, and being from the OECD, we mainly represent governments. This is a big challenge for policymakers. Clearly, this is a big challenge for policymakers because it puts a lot of pressure on the established tourism actors as well as on the existing policy framework. So this is a big challenge in many ways. First point, consumer protection and regulatory framework. New services may not be covered by the existing rules, and so we have to address this. Trust plays a big role, you know, a vital role in peer-to-peer exchanges. And as you know, there are a number of review systems by the consumer itself, but in the end, you know, it does not constitute a consumer protection framework. So it's just trust between a number of people. It may create a number of competitive imbalances and sometimes unfair competition because we have a coexistence of highly regulated businesses with sometimes unregulated providers. And this, of course, creates a strong risk of unfair competition. And this is pushing, of course, governments and the industry to rethink, you know, this regulatory environment. The area of taxation is also a main area of concern, and it's not proper to the sharing economy in tourism. It touches also the digital economy in general, and when you see the discussion which is going on now with companies like Google and some others in Europe and elsewhere, you understand that for government this is a real challenge to see how best to tax these activities with the current taxation system. And in tourism, this is also the case. So we have a number of countries moving, for example, the Australian tax office that provides clear guidance on the tax rules related to the sharing economy. You also have a number of platforms now which are offering more information on this issue of taxation, informing the owners of their obligation, but there are also a number, in particular at the local level, a number of cities like Paris, like Barcelona and some others, which have forced also the platforms to regulate and to report on taxation issues. Labor market risk should not be underestimated, and this is true for drivers like Uber, Airbnb, drivers or Airbnb hosts, because these individuals are delivering services a little bit outside the normal employment framework. So we have to be very cautious about this to see to what extent this presents a risk for either the workers or for the consumers and the tourists. And of course, we are all aware in particular of a discussion which has taken place in relation to Uber drivers in the United States and also in a number of other countries. Impact of law on local communities and public interest. This also should not be neglected because there are a number of potential negative externalities linked to renting his private house when it's not within certain limits. And we know now that a number of cities, like again Barcelona or Amsterdam, have been very concerned with these negative externalities. It could be noise, it could be other type of disturbance, and they are trying to look at these issues more seriously. But also, I mean, the price of real estate or the price of rental houses can also be severely affected by this. So in front of all of these challenges and opportunities, I mean, how have governments reacted today? And our analysis is that they are mainly in a wait-and-see position, because the full implication of a sharing economy is not yet completely, understood, So they are still working on this. First action is about the review of rules and regulation and clarifying how all of this apply to the sharing economy actors. Here we have a number of examples. Austria, for example, issued guidance on the legal requirements for providing private rental accommodation. New Zealand has been reviewing its regulatory framework for small passenger vehicle services. Introduction of licensing and permit systems, for example, in Amsterdam, in Portland, in Boston. And so these cities have been putting some specific rules to put a property on the market through the sharing economy. Direct engagement and support for sharing economic activities. A number of governments are also directly supporting this part of the tourism economy. In Israel, for example, the Ministry of Tourism is supporting training for Eat with Host. So this is a specific action. Korea has been also actively promoting, and in particular the city of Seoul, global meets local. And this is an initiative which has been also very actively put forward. Self-regulation should not be forgotten. And we have, of course, all the platforms now understand that this is also in their own interest to move forward with a minimum level of regulation, quality controls, standards, and insurance system. We have the Airbnb $1 million host guarantee, which complete, what the owner has in terms of personal insurance. Drivey has partnered with Allianz Insurance and Mondial Assistance. This is another example. Uber driver are subject to criminal background and motor vehicle record checks, etc. So we have a number of self-regulated operations which show that things are progressively moving under the pressure, in particular, of governments. And this is why such studies as the one we did with the OECD is important, because it creates awareness on all of these challenges, but also on the opportunities, because when looking at this, we have been taking a very positive stake. And we can see from 2 years ago, between 2 years ago and now, that many governments, in fact, have been moving much more constructively and positively at looking at this part of the economy. So what is the path forward for tourism policymakers? So it's, we as government, we need to better understand how the sharing economy is changing tourism and impacting economies. We are crucially lacking the good data to understand this sharing economy. What does it mean in terms of value added, creation of employment, taxation, etc., regulation. So we are working hard on this, and we are trying also to develop some partnership with platforms to support this, because platforms have a huge number of data, and we are speaking these days a lot about big data. Second point is that we need to strengthen the strategic operating framework in order to take, and this has to take the broader policy objective also into account. here we have countries like United Kingdom and France, which have been doing extensive review of the sharing economy and of the policy implication. But we are also looking at the relationship between this and, for example, the informal tourism economy, or the role of government in marketplace. So, as you see, this is touching many different issues. Most important also, probably very important, is how can we rethink, to some extent, this policy incentive to ensure that the decision that governments will make will be creative, open, transparent. And this is not easy for governments to deal with this digital economy sector. This requires new way of thinking, which is usually not part of a government. And just one example, in Denmark, they have what they call the Mind Lab, which is a place organized by the governments, which bring different stakeholders to brainstorm, to test, and to assess new policy approaches. This is something important that now governments have to take. They have to be creative in the way to address these issues. Next point is modernize policy and regulatory approaches. As I said, here we have a number of highly regulated operators, but we also have more or less totally unregulated actors. So we are very concerned about making sure the level playing field is there. And so it doesn't mean necessarily more regulation for unregulated players. It may mean deregulation in general. So this is the type of issues that the OECD is looking at these days, not specifically to tourism, but in general for the digital economy. So in a nutshell, this is what this report is telling you about. I think we are just at the beginning of this discussion. We have complex issues in front of us to discuss on taxation, on regulation, and so on, and we will continue to work on this. So thank you very much. I think we just have 2 or 3 minutes of maybe for 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll have to close this discussion. Thank you very much. If there is any question, we'll be pleased. Otherwise, we can also discuss following this session. Yeah, we have one. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Peter Jordan. I'm the Senior Tourism Analyst at Toposophy. We're a company that does a lot of research on this. And we've found that one of the obstacles that we come up against, and I don't know if the OECD comes up against the same obstacle, but how much cooperation you get from platforms when it comes to sharing data, because this is I think the thing that gives them the most power. And I wonder whether this is a concern for you, or how much help you really get when it comes to this, because I think the key for this is always in the data.
I think it's a good question, and clearly, I mean, as I said, we have seen much of improvement between 2 years ago and now, because 2 years ago, a number of governments have been moving, saying we have to do something about this new part of the tourism economy because of regulation, taxation issues in particular. And nobody was moving. But then a number of countries have been moving, and so platforms understand that now they have to discuss with government, to sit at the table. And for example, yesterday the OECD organized a policy workshop for the launch of this publication. We had about 40 countries in the room, and at the table we had, in this particular panel, Airbnb, we had OTREC, which represents the European Restaurant and Hotel Association, and we had policymakers. So we were able to this. But I think it's a big challenge. And my impression is that still we have a lot to improve, in particular in terms of data sharing, in particular of getting more from platforms for their data. Of course, there are issues linked to privacy, to protection of the data, but there are many ways we can use big data, such as this one, for our research. And we will push for this, and some cities are already using this data for their own business to develop, to better understand the market. Because one issue is that, for example, if we speak about accommodation, here we speak a lot about private accommodation. And the truth is that governments know very little about private accommodation and the way this accommodation is used by tourists. So by partnering with a platform, we can have a much better understanding of the market. So thank you very much. I think it's time to close, or we have another time for a question? Yeah? No, it's time to close.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Alain, für die aktuelle Entwicklung. Ich denke, das ist ein Thema, was uns auch in Zukunft noch weiter beschäftigen wird. Wir haben jetzt 10 Minuten Pause und wir werden uns anschließend mit dem Ryanair-Effekt beschäftigen.